next time this show will be post preseason of the Dallas Cowboys, because on Saturday, the Dallas Cowboys played the Chargers to end their August slate of football. And tonight, we'll talk about the players that we will be watching closely and players that might be playing for a job as well. So let's get to it. What is up, everyone, and welcome into A to Z Sports Dallas Primetime. I am your host, Mauricio Rodriguez, streaming with you live every Sunday and Thursday night at 8 p.m. Central here on Dallas On Demand Sports Talk Network. Also, catching up with you Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday with quick-hitting videos in case you want to check that out. But today, we are doing a live show. Sorry about the early start. I've got some things that kept me from starting the show at 8 p.m. on the dot, so I had to go earlier, had to go live earlier. But we have a lot to talk about. The Cowboys play the LA Chargers on Saturday. It will be the last time that the Cowboys play with a 90-man roster on Tuesday of next week. That will be trimmed down to 53, and that's what this game is about, honestly, right? We'll also talk about Trey Lance, because we just cannot have a Cowboys preseason finale show if we don't get into the quarterback elephant in the room. But this is about the bottom of the depth chart, guys. So today I wanted to talk about that. I wanted to talk some about the players that I'm wondering if they can change their projected fates. And I think that the recent defensive line additions really make things interesting as well at several spots. So we'll get into all that. But first, thank you for being here. Hit the like button for me if you enjoy the show. Shout out to Brandon, who says, keep doing great work, bro. And he also asks about Nathan Pitt. And first and foremost, thank you, Brandon. About Nathan, the undrafted running back of the Cowboys, we have seen him. I don't think we've seen him a whole lot. I honestly thought of Nathan since he was signed by Dallas that it was unlikely to be one of those UDFA surprises. I really don't think he's in the mix to end up in the 53-man roster. But hopefully he turns it up on Saturday and at least makes us think twice. Welcome, everyone, into the show. Thanks so much for being here. So let's get into it. I'm going to intentionally skip Trey Lance for a second here, because he's first on my notepad, naturally. But we're gonna look the other way for a little bit so we can start with something else. I want to talk about the defensive line first. I want to talk about how the recent moves how these recent moves make me very intrigued about how this is all going to shake out. Because you could maybe aim for like 9 to 10 defensive linemen. That's including tackles and including edge rushers. And here's how I had it set up before the Cowboys brought in Mr. Linval Joseph, right? So I have 5 edge rushers, and I'm including Micah there. So I have Micah, Lawrence, Nealand, Lawson, and Golston in my 53-man. And then a defensive tackle, I had Oza, Masi, Phillips, Jordan Phillips, who was just traded for with the Giants, and then 7th-round rookie Justin Rogers. The way that I thought about it was that I don't really feel like I had to keep Albert Huggins, or I had to keep UDFA Denzel Daxon, whom the Cowboys are going to be able to carry on the practice squad as an international player anyways. But I also knew that, hey, this is just 1-3 tech, and he's back up, and 1 nose tackle, and he's back up, right? That's basically how it looked like. Now you're adding Linval Joseph into the conversation, and we had a show about that yesterday. Linval Joseph is making the roster. This is something that is obvious, right? Mike Zimmer type of guy. He was with them 2014 all the way to 2019. The Cowboys may be getting some insurance policy there as well with Masi Smith. Now, I'm going to open a parenthesis here. A lot of people have been trying to make this about, the Cowboys hate Masi. I don't think that's what that was about at all. If you've been listening to Primetime for the last couple of weeks, 3 weeks, you know we were concerned about every single defensive line spot in terms of depth, and Linval Joseph is that, plus insurance policy in case things don't shake out with Masi Smith. Now, is this just a situation where you just plug in Linval Joseph into the defensive tackle room go into it with 5 DTs, 5 edge rushers, and that's including Micah Parsons. And then you have like this gray area with Micah and the linebackers, and maybe you're carrying 5 linebackers without counting Micah. Or maybe you go short at linebacker. Maybe you go Kendricks, Clark, Overshown, Marist, and don't carry a 5th guy because your 5th guy is technically Micah. That is going to be interesting to see. Is Justin Rogers a spot safe? That in itself is worth the conversation. What I think we know is that the Cowboys like to keep their draft picks on the roster. Now, they're not going to be able to do that with Nathan Thomas, it seems like, because he's been injured and the Cowboys don't know what they've got in him. He hasn't played in these preseason games or hasn't been a participant in camp, all that. Ryan Flournoy seemed to be in question, and we'll talk more about him in a moment. But it seems to me that they're going to try to find a way to keep Justin Rogers. All I'm saying is, if you want to go long at safety because Julius Wood has impressed you, and you want to go long at linebacker because you like one of those guys, and you also have other spots that you want to go long with on the offensive side of things, is there a scenario where 7th-round rookie Justin Rogers could be fighting for his spot on Saturday versus the Chargers? That's the kind of stuff that I really look forward to seeing closely. I think Justin Rogers' snap count on Saturday should be pretty high because obviously he is going to be, looks like the 3rd-string nose tackle if we put Limble Joseph above him. So naturally he's set up for plenty of reps. Carl Davis is gone. So that's one player that I'm going to be watching closely because I think he's going to be playing, trying to impress his coaches 100%. Now, man, before I get to more, let me get into the comments, man. Let me get into the comments here because I see Toxic Tom, who I had not seen in a good while. Toxic Tom, welcome into the show, man. Appreciate you being here. Isidro says, our pass rush is weak sauce right now, Mo. And I agree, but also we have not seen Micah and D-Law, right? And that changes the entire conversation. Now, you guys know that when Sam Williams went down, I did press the panic button, right? Remember, we had Aisha Morrison in here, and we were talking about our preseason notes, and then that show kind of became a panic scene for the defensive ends as we started to break it down. I think adding Carl Lawson just really made me feel better, paired with the fact that they're still playing him inside, but Mike Zimmer was like, yeah, Chauncey Golson is actually a defensive end. So suddenly you have more names in there. It's a bit more beefed up, if you will. So I'm kind of happy with the defensive ends right now. I kind of feel much better now that Lawson is in the mix because he might not seem like much, but now you have a strong number 3, a strong number 4 in Lawson and Nealand, or the other way around, however the Cowboys want to go about it. Man, shout out to everyone in the chat, man. Jet Lee, man, I'm sending you nothing but positive vibes and thoughts, man. Saw your comment earlier. I don't know how long you've been watching for, but I went through something very similar last year. So if you ever want to reach out, the DMs are open on Twitter. Man, positive thoughts and positive vibes headed your way, bro. Gregory says, Mo, how much influence does the line coaches have in the hiring and cutting of the players? Man, that's a pretty tricky question to answer, but here's how I see it. Based on books, based on podcasts and stuff where they've interviewed, GMs and all that, the way that I understand it is basically the head coach receives input from pretty much everybody, right? So I would say definitely they have influence in it. And since right now the Cowboys are kind of running like this, Cowboys are kind of like 2 different companies within the coaching staff, right? Because Mike Zimmer is his own entity, right? Mike Zimmer is not really Mike McCarthy's guy. So I think this is pretty much Mike Zimmer's show on the defensive side of the ball. So I would expect them to really have a very big influence in how this plays out. But the way that I've always understood coaching staffs to work is pretty much every of the assistant coaches and coordinators basically report to the head coach. And maybe they got this system where the assistants report to the coordinators and then the coordinators to the head coach. Or if the head coach is offensive or defensive guy, he'll obviously have much more of a say in that side of the ball. For example, Mike McCarthy will likely go to bat for, say, hypothetically, Malik Davis, and I'm just making up this example. I'm not saying Mike McCarthy is going to do that this year, but say that Mike McCarthy likes Malik Davis. He is likely going to go to bat for him, and he's going to have that final say. But maybe on the defensive side of the ball, he's going to be much more willing to be like, yep, I trust you, bro, and you do whatever you got to do. You keep the fifth linebacker that you want. And maybe John Fassel as well in this instance, because a fifth linebacker is obviously going to be much more of a special teams decision than anything else as well. So it's tricky, but I definitely think everyone has plenty of influence in that sense. Moving on a little bit here, I got to talk about the player who is in the graphic, the player who is in the thumbnail on the YouTube side of things. Man, we've got to talk about Izzy Mukuamu, because predictably, in the final week of training camp in Oxnard, we started talking about Izzy Mukuamu a whole lot more. And shout out to everyone with boots on the ground, right? I'm talking about the No-See Walkers of the world, Joe Machotas of the world, Calvin Watkins, everyone who's out there in Oxnard watching practice and putting these videos up for our consumption on social media. Izzy Mukuamu on the final day of practice, he had some moments, man. And the way that Patrick Walker at Voice of the Star on Twitter X, he described it was he basically got burnt by Jalen Brooks, if I remember correctly. And then 3 different wide receivers went up against Izzy, and Izzy went crazy on them. Now, based on the clips that I've seen, I think those receivers were, if I remember correctly, I think it was Tyron Billy Johnson, and then I think it was Brooks again, and I don't remember who. I think it was Kevontae Turpin, the other one. But Izzy Mukuamu, one of the interesting things about him is that he seems to be competing at cornerback. Now, this is speculation on my end, but preseason game number 2, Izzy played at corner. Like, he had 17 nickel snaps, 1 snap as a single high safety, 1 at cornerback, outside, and then 1 in the box, I think, and 1 in the defensive line, and then again, 17 in the slot. So, seems to me that Izzy is competing at corner. Now, this makes sense with what we've been talking about since early in the offseason. You looked at the safety room, and there was Hooker, Wilson, Thomas, Bell, and now Julius Wood. So, Izzy Mukuamu is buried. He has no shot if we're talking about him fighting for his spot at safety. That is done. He's not getting that chance. However, if you shift that conversation into, can he be the 5th cornerback, the 6th cornerback? Now that's a whole different story. Because Mukuamu is suddenly not fighting Marquise Bell. He's not fighting Juan J. Thomas. He is fighting Kemon Hall, Andrew Booth Jr., and I think that's pretty much it. I don't think Josh Butler is looking like a 53-man roster guy. I don't think Josh DeVere is either. So I think it's going to end up being a foot race between Andrew Booth Jr., Kemon Hall, Izzy Mukuamu. Now, if you carry 5 corners, then it's only going to be 1 spot for those 3. They might carry 6, and that might give Izzy a big chance at the team. Now, there's something that I cannot stop thinking about that it makes me think that Mukuamu has a high chance of making this roster, even though it's been a somewhat rough offseason for him. I'm going to give you a top 5 right now. You're going to let me know what that top 5 is about, okay? So I'm going to give you the players in the top 5. You guys are going to tell me, what are these players top 5 in? Juan J. Thomas, Sam Williams, Jalen Tolbert, Hunter Lipke, Izzy Mukuamu. That's a top 5 in a specific category on the team in 2023. Juan J. Thomas, Sam Williams, Jalen Tolbert, Hunter Lipke, Izzy Mukuamu. Top 5. Special teams snaps, right? Mukuamu has a chance of making this team just based off that. And you guys know me. I would go to war for Izzy Mukuamu, man. I've been talking about Mukuamu since early in the offseason. I thought it was pretty interesting when Nick Harris from DallasCowboys.com, after the offseason, after like the OTAs and minicamp portion of it, he let us know that, hey, he was working with the reserves, basically. Like, he was not getting these reps in the offseason. But the Cowboys maybe were just trying to get Eric Scott Jr. a lot of playing time. Maybe they were trying to do the same with some of their young guys like Kalen Carson and all that. Izzy Mukuamu might be in the mix. There's been some noise surrounding his name lately. Is that people hearing things? Maybe. I don't know, honestly. But I'm starting to think that Mukuamu is playing for his job on Saturday night. Like, he has a good performance. How do you cut him, right? He's ending training camp strongly. Had a good game, decent game in the preseason. These might end up happening for him. It might end up happening. But I think it's going to be at a corner if it does. If it does, it's going to be at a corner. Now, let me tell you something, man, about the special team snaps. That doesn't guarantee you anything, right? Because number 6 on that list is Nashawn Wright. So it doesn't guarantee you anything, but still, I think something that we should take into account. Toxic Thompson, I would much rather carry a player like Easy, who offers me multiple position flexibility, than CJ Goodwin. Man, I don't know about that one. I kind of see what you're saying, Toxic, and ideally, yes, I agree. Like, ideally, I want my players to do everything, right? I want players to play on offense, play on special teams, or defense and special teams. You want them to do everything, right? But there's many of the top tier coaches in the NFL world that carry an ace, like CJ Goodwin. Now, is this a discussion about how good CJ Goodwin really is? Now, that's a different story. But I wouldn't knock CJ Goodwin right now, especially after in 2023. I feel like we all did miss him on special teams. Like, you could notice that CJ Goodwin was not on that team last year when he suffered a season-ending injury early on. Sorry. I do agree, though, he's not a Matthew Slater. Where Matthew Slater is one of those guys that, man, that dude might make the Hall of Fame just as a special teamer one day well into his career, no, right? Well into his retirement, excuse me. I'm not calling for Matthew Slater to make the Hall of Fame. I wouldn't completely dismiss it, though. But you don't have to be a Hall of Famer to be the special teams ace is what I'm trying to say here. And what I do think is that regardless of what we all think about CJ Goodwin, you got to pencil him in like a lock. You got to look at CJ Goodwin as an absolute lock. He has barely even played in the preseason. He didn't play preseason game number 1. Played a little bit in week number 2. And who else played on week number 2? Jalen Tolbert, for example, right? Tyler Guyton went for an entire half. So they were a little bit more willing to play some of the important players on the team, or at least starter types. So I don't see CJ Goodwin being cut at all. I think he's one of the top locks on this squad, honestly. And especially because of last year. I think they missed him last year, and they're going to want him on that team. So Mukuamu is one of the guys to watch, and just sticking with the defensive backs for a little bit here. What if Keemon Hall goes crazy again, right? Mike McCarthy gave the media a big quote the other day when he was like, there's not a day in camp where he doesn't make a play. You want somebody like that on your team. I think that's pretty much obvious. If that's how your coach is describing you, and then you're translating that to the preseason and you have 2 picks in 2 games, one of them went for a pick 6, you're making some noise. Now, do that for 3 preseason games, though, and, man, you're forcing your way into that 53. So I want to watch Keemon Hall very closely when this game kicks off on Saturday night. I think that's an obvious one. And then the other one, a name that has been steadily on the rise, and I know some people, like, shout out to Big James, he has been on Julius Wood for a good while now. Julius Wood is making himself a staple name, right? Like, now every Cowboys fan and content creator and media member is talking about him, because suddenly he's like, I might force y'all to carry 5 safeties when this thing gets started. And, man, you got to give it to him. Undrafted rookie, came out of nowhere for a lot of people. I know for me he did. Like, I didn't include him as one of the potential UDFA gems out of the Cowboys UDFA class. But Julius Woods is making some noise. He might end up in that roster. If he does, though, you're likely going to carry 5 safeties. Or you're going to trade one of them. Like, I'm just saying, right? if you feel good enough about Julius Wood for him to be on your roster as a fifth safety, do you maybe put somebody on the trade block ahead of the season? And maybe you call around, shop for some running backs. There are some out there. And maybe you try to maximize your assets. I know a lot of people won't like the idea of trading a player that we know to be a good one, like, say, Juan J. Thomas, Marquise Bell, just sticking with this position specifically. But I wouldn't rule it out. I think if there is one position that you're going to take talent off of, it's got to be safety, because you're just loaded at that spot. You're loaded there. Could be, man. Julius Wood, though, how does he perform week 3? That seems like another big-time addition. If he goes out there and balls out, how do you cut that guy? Do you risk him like you did with Isaiah Land last year? And I know we don't want to talk about Isaiah Land because we all get teary-eyed and we start crying because we wish he was here still instead of in Indianapolis. But, yeah, man, he could be one of those guys, honestly. And Holly, with the perfect question here, who asks, does Zimmer's scheme call for 5 safeties? Not really. Not from a schematic point of view, right? This would be more of one of those decisions where you're like, man, I'm no Dan Quinn, but I do have 5 pretty damn good safeties. I don't want to lose any of them. Now, you don't have to be Dan Quinn. You don't have to go all big nickel all the time. But look at it this way. If you're in that defensive meeting room and you're trying to figure out who are going to be your 24, 25 players, something like that, and you have 2 nameplates on your hands, right? You've got 2 nameplates and there's only one more spot on the team. Micah is playing some linebacker, and in addition to him, you've got Eric Kendricks, Damone Clark, Overshawn, and Maris Leofau. You've got Buddy Johnson, linebacker, on one hand, and then on the other hand, the nameplate is Julius Woods. What do you do? Right? That's how you also have to think about it a little bit, because Mike Zimmer might not be a big nickel type coach. He might not be Dan Quinn. But what if you just go, man, let me block this user very quickly. We're getting some spam on the Facebook side of things. All right, that's taken care of. That's how I would look at it. Mike McDaniel recently said in a press conference, the Dolphins head coach, he was like, man, you got to let these players dictate what you do with the 53-man roster. And again, you don't have to be Dan Quinn, but you've got to be able to be like, listen, Kendricks, Clark, Overshawn, Leofau are going to be active pretty much every time. My 5th linebacker is likely going to be a healthy scratch every single time. If Julius Wood can play special teams, screw it. I'm going to have him instead. It could be, man. And I agree with Alex right here. Who would have ever thought we would one day be saying we're loaded at safety? Let's trade one. That's an insane group. It is the best group on the team. Absolutely. At least in terms of depth. Like, there's not another position group that compares to this one. It's insane. Malik Hooker, Donovan Wilson, your starters. Thomas could start elsewhere. Marquise Bell could start elsewhere. Heck, he started 8 games for you the other year, last year, and that was at linebacker, but still. And then last but not least, you've got a promising rookie in Julius Wood. Embarrassment of riches, says Isidro, a great problem to have. So there you go. That's for the defensive backs. What else are we looking for? And let me know if you want to, hey man, if you want to bring up players that you're going to be watching on Saturday, let me know in the chat. I want to read what you guys are monitoring, so I do as well. I've got some, let's get into the obvious portion of the show. We're all going to be looking at Deuce Vaughn. I said it early in the week. Deuce is in a unique spot because his best plays in practice, they look like they're dead because they just blow the whistle. But when that whistle is not what determines the end of the play, and instead you got to take number 42 down, and that's a whole different ball game, because Deuce Vaughn is one crazy dude and one small dude, small target for tacklers too. So sometimes he gets those dirty yards. Sometimes he hits the spin move like he has done in several preseason game instances now. His cuts are nasty. Like, Deuce is one of those guys that when the game is on, it's a different ball game. And if Deuce Vaughn goes out there and he does more of that, there's going to be a lot of preseason evidence for you to go, man, you just cannot cut this guy. Like, you got to see how he looks year 2. We shouldn't be treating Deuce Vaughn as a third-round rookie, second-round rookie that didn't do great in year 1, and thus we are done with them, right? Deuce goes out there, he does more of that, and even if he doesn't, this is somebody that you should want on your 53 because there's something special about him, and you just know it. At least that's how I feel based on what we've seen from him. We saw more of that last weekend, so I'm willing to bet on him. But we all should be monitoring Deuce Vaughn. What does he need to make the roster? I think he needs a strong performance, but more than anything, he needs not to stink it up, right? That's what it feels for me. I don't think we see Rico. I don't think we see Sick, obviously, on Saturday. And I say obviously because of the way that they've been treating him, like a bona fide running back 1, even though I think Rico should get that treatment. But it's going to be a lot of Deuce Vaughn. A lot of Deuce Vaughn on Saturday, for sure. And yeah, I think he's special because he's a short guy too. Yeah, absolutely toxic. He's a short guy like me. He makes my dreams look possible, at least feasible, if you will, or not mathematically impossible based on height. But all kidding aside, Deuce Vaughn, man, he has something. I want to see more of that. And then the next name on the obvious items, it's got to be Trey Lance, right? Trey is not fighting for a job, obviously. He kind of is, but not a roster spot. So Trey Lance is in there. Trey Lance, as Jerry Jones already told us, by the way, he has earned his spot on the 53-man roster. He earned it when the Cowboys traded for him. They were not going to give up a 4th rounder only to get rid of him after the 2023 season. So he's earned that a whole long time ago. Now the question is, what does he need to do to take away Cooper Rush's QB2 job? Can he do that at all? And I talked earlier in the week about some roster gymnastics that the Cowboys could pull off if they wanted to. Like if Trey Lance convinces the Cowboys that he can be QB2, the Cowboys could get creative and maybe do that as a wink nut thing and maybe send Cooper Rush to the practice squad, at least to start the season, or maybe for the entire season if we're getting extreme here. But ultimately, forget about that. Forget about the roster spots and all that. What does Trey Lance need to do to be QB2 of the Cowboys? I think it's a difficult question, but I think it's definitely got to be an improvement over week 2 and a whole different story than week 1. Because week 1 was not exactly pretty for Trey Lance. Week 2 was a step forward, but then again, that kind of was all it was, right? It wasn't that Trey Lance looked incredibly sharp in week 2. It wasn't that he was perfect. In fact, a lot of the problems that we saw in week 1, we saw in week 2, just a little bit less of them and a little bit more of the good stuff. We saw that fade shot with Ryan Flournoy. We saw more of his legs. We saw this. We saw that. So I want to see more of Trey Lance. I think it's got to be a better game than in week 2 for him to really establish himself as a number 2. And let's see what happens. Do you know what Mike McCarthy said earlier this week? There are rare instances where Cooper Rush doesn't take us down the field to score. So this team, we know how they feel about Cooper Rush. They are high on him. Can Trey Lance now change their minds? That is going to be the big question for him. Jet Li says Mike Zimmer is the last defensive coordinator that we won the Super Bowl with. Man, a long time ago, hoping this is the one. So yeah, Trey Lance, man, tough one. Absolutely a tough one. I don't think one game is going to be enough for him to go out there and be the most polished quarterback ever. But it's a big game for Trey. Like, this is the last time you're getting under those lights, barring any injuries. And you're going to hit free agency next year. And, man, what do you do? Go, right? It's a big game for Trey Lance. Let's see what happens with him. I kind of lean towards him being QB3 right now, based on what the Cowboys are saying about Cooper Rush. The upside is there, though. Like, you can see it, right? And I talked about this after last week's game. I think he did crack that door open. Like, I thought it was firmly closed after week 1. I thought this is Cooper Rush's backup squad. And now it seems like that door is open. Seems like Trey Lance is fighting for it. Needs a strong game, though, on Saturday. If I remember correctly, didn't Mike McCarthy say, like, this is going to be Trey Lance's show in week 3? So maybe we don't even see Cooper Rush. So we'll see what happens with Trey, man. Other stuff that's on my mind headed into the weekend. Brevin Spanford, man, I just wonder about Brevin. I think there's a chance that the Cowboys just go into the season with 3 tight ends. But can Brevin Spanford change their mind? And maybe some other tight end. But right now, I think the guys that are going to be in there, it's going to be Ferguson, it's going to be Schoonmaker, and then John Stephens Jr. That 4th tight end spot, though, it's wide open. Ryan Flournoy is another guy that we're going to be watching closely. 3 weeks ago, it didn't seem like Flournoy was a roster lock, but suddenly he's starting to sound like one, right? Flournoy was not around to start camp, was inconsistent in the preseason opener, and in the meantime, Tyron Billy Johnson got off to a hot start. Jalen Cropper started to take over a little bit deeper into camp, but now, big game for Flournoy last week, bad game for Cropper. That's going to be a battle. I think, though, Flournoy is starting to seem like the likely option to be on that roster when it's all said and done as number 6, right? Because I think Lamb, Cooks, Tolbert, Turpin, and Brooks are locks at this point. I know some people want to argue about Jalen Brooks. I don't see it, man. I think he's on the 53. I think that's locked in by now. So I think it's more Flournoy versus Cropper than anything else for that 6th spot. Isidro says, Flournoy is my pet cat, Mo. I was underwhelmed by the preseason opener. Week 2, though, was much better, and that touchdown was nasty. And then he went out there in practice yesterday, and he goes up, high points the ball, dunks on Daron Bland. That's exciting. I know Kelvin Harmon has some fans, as Eric is pointing out here in the chat. I don't see Harmon, though, on the team, honestly. I think somebody to watch on Saturday, but it's going to be a very, 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 very long shot for him to be in there. And I think that's pretty much the big stories that we should be following closely. What do the Cowboys do at left tackle? Could that provide us some hints as to what they're going to do if Chuma Edoga starts at IR, which he's likely going to do? Is it going to be Josh Ball? Is it really going to be Josh Ball's show as the swing tackle? We'll see, man. We'll see. Can't wait to see our newest defensive tackle, says David McKnight. Man, that's also something I'm wondering about in the sense of Saturday, as far as Saturday goes. Who's playing, right? Because Masi is likely not going to play, although maybe he does after he didn't play last week because of the allergy stuff. So Masi could be in there. But then what about Jordan Phillips, Linval Joseph? Do they play? The newcomers, do they get on the field? I'm wondering about that. That's going to be a fun position to look at. More so in the All-22 once it comes out, I guess, for us to get a better idea. Gregory says, Mo, you should do a few shows where you interview a few of the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders. Man, that would be a random series. I'm not going to lie. I also wouldn't be opposed to it. I wrote about the Cowboys cheerleaders this offseason, actually, for A to Z Sports. Because here's the thing. I've been obsessed with the Cowboys ever since I can remember. Cheerleaders, I was never into the whole cheerleaders thing. Like, I wasn't into I didn't buy the calendars. I didn't follow, like, the reality shows that they had over on Facebook. I didn't follow any of that. I didn't know who they were. And I know a lot of Cowboys fans are very into it. And then I saw the Netflix show, and I kind of, it's a sports-ish. I don't know if it's sports-ish, but yeah, like, it's one of those documentaries that they know which buttons to press, and they make it all dramatic and stuff. But I was intrigued enough. My girlfriend is a huge Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders fan, and she made me watch it, right? And I was reluctant at first, and then I got into it. Like those memes where the husband is like, man, I don't want to watch that. And then by episode 3, they're all hooked into it. That was me this summer with the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders documentary. There's some interesting stories in there. Like there's some tough stuff going on there. And man, you got to respect it, I guess. So that would be a random show, Gregory. But hey, let's do it, right? Let's see if we can make something happen there. Anyways, that will be it for me tonight. Hit the like button for me. Hope that you enjoyed the show, and I'll see you on Sunday. And by then, the preseason will be over. The season will be in the horizon, and we'll be talking roster cuts in no time. Hit the like button. See you on Sunday. Enjoy your weekend. Bye-bye.